Welcome to Texas+Water, a podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of water with those making waves. My name is Todd Votteler, and I'm your host for Texas+Water. I'm also the principal of Collaborative Water Resolution, which you can find at waterdisputes.org. In addition, I'm editor-in-chief of Texas+Water and the Texas+Water Journal. Both publications are free. My guest today is Sam Hermitte. Sam is the Assistant Deputy Executive Administrator of Water Science and Conservation for the Texas Water Development Board. Sam's areas of responsibility at the board include strategic planning, legislative analysis and implementation, water data, drought policy and coordination, flood priority research projects, and special initiatives such as the development of the Texas Water Data Hub and TexasFlood.org, which is a flood preparedness and response website. Additionally, Sam leads the Texas Water Data Initiative, participates in the National Internet of Water Coalition, serves as an advisory board member to the Texas Disaster Information System, and represents the Texas Water Development Board on both of the state's Water Conservation Advisory Council and the Drought Preparedness Council. Sam holds a bachelor's degree in public policy analysis from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a master's degree in public affairs with a portfolio in integrated watershed studies at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. Sam, welcome to Texas+Water, and thank you for making time to talk with me.
Thanks, Todd. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I always start out by asking somebody about their background in water. And I'm going to do that, but I have to say before I do that, after reading your bio, that you do all the fun things at the Water Development Board. That stands out from your bio, and I love the kind of the breadth of things that you do. And so, it's great to have you on because you touch in so many areas that are so critical for the state in terms of water management and water planning. So, having said that, when did you first become interested in water? When, in your childhood, or when you were studying? What was the kind of moment you said, I think I'm going to spend the rest of my career working on water?
Well, I was always interested in water as a kid, and I loved the beach, loved playing in the waves, but it wasn't really until I got to college and was an undergraduate. I was a coxswain on the rowing team for all 4 years, so I spent a lot of time on the water and traveling to different water bodies, especially on the eastern seaboard and and then occasionally to San Diego. And then I also spent a semester at sea when I was in UNC as an undergraduate. And that was on a tall ship. There's one where you're on sort of a cruise ship. It wasn't that one. This one, you actually sailed on a tall ship. And we sailed from Florida through the Bermuda Triangle, which was really fun. And then down to the Keys. And I remember one night I was out on the bowsprit, which is that long piece of wood that extends off the bow. And you could just lay actually on the bowsprit. And there was no moon, and I have never seen stars like that. And I've been to West Texas and, dark sky areas, but the stars and then the phosphorescence coming up out of the water under the bowsprit, it was just like being in another universe and something completely magical. And I felt like this is what I want to do. I want to be connected to this in some way in my career.
Oh my gosh, that's a great story. So did you actually, they teach you do any of the rigging of the sails and all that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to use sextants and, use the stars to navigate. I mean, we also had modern navigation as well, but you learned a lot of different sailing skills and navigation. And everybody did a research project. So my project was related to the amount of macropelagic tar in the Sargasso Sea and how that had changed over time as regulations in the shipping industry changed. Gotcha.
Well, that's fascinating. And I love the astronomy angle. I just got back from the Big Island in Hawaii with my family, and we were counting on spending one night, looking at the stars and getting away from where we were staying And of course, Hawaii, there's so many observatories there. It's cloudy every night.
Oh, cute.
It's kicking myself.
That's too bad.
Anyway, but so you had a great introduction to water, and I'm always fascinated with how many of the people who are my guests who have a similar experience. They had a close association with water, when they're growing up or when they get into college, and it just kind of shapes the rest of their life in that way. It begins a lifelong fascination with the subject. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about water data. This is the first episode, I think, where really, discussed water data. But, in thinking about it, it's like, that's, data is what's critical for essentially everything we do. And I've never really talked about it. And I'm not too sure how much the public knows about it. And so, you're just the perfect person to talk about this subject, based on your bio, which I read earlier. And so why don't we start out with why, we've got water data in the forms that we have it, where we have it, and why it's important.
Well, I think you hit on it, Todd, with your initial comment, which is that data underlies everything that we do. And I'm really grateful that you're talking now about water data because it's the foundation of decision making. And so just like it underlies decisions in other sectors, it's critical in the water space. And in terms of what data we have now and where it is, there's a lot of legacy. People started collecting data at different times, different spatial scales, different resolutions, using different types of technology, different tools that were available. I mean, we have some stream gauge data, I believe, that goes back to the late 1800s. Other data has been collected more recently. So it's data. Water data in Texas, and this is generally true across the nation too, tends to be housed within the individual entity that is responsible for that particular data set or that particular area. And so it's very irregular in that way. The scales are different. The fields, for example, so a field being the way of describing the data, is it collected weekly? Is it near real time? So it's collected 15 minutes. The volume, for example, so whether or not it's measured in gallons or acre feet, these things are not uniform. They're different across different entities. And that's the reality that we live in today, is that everybody who's come into this landscape has come in on a different day with a different mission and a different purpose. And so now we're trying to look very broadly across the landscape and see what we can do to make it easier to bring those pieces of the larger water landscape together.
So, two things stand out to me, related to what you just said. And I was just thinking back to when I was doing my dissertation 25 years ago or so, how difficult it was to get water from some of the organizations that I'd need to get it from, and which I eventually did get it from. But it was not an easy task to do that. And then how kind of surprised I was later on as I realized that, Texas has a lot of water data, and it goes back a fairly long time span compared to a lot of other states. And so, that was kind of a shocking thing to me when I finished all that up around 2000 and then started doing, some work in, other areas besides Texas, that I'd get there. You're like, oh, you don't have 40 years of continuous data or 50 years or whatever it is. And so I'm just curious. I mean, is that accurate that, we're, as a state, we're in pretty good shape in terms of, the historic data on water compared to maybe some other states, what they have?
Yeah, I think Texas does a really good job. We've got a lot of groundwater data, and I think we stand out relative to other states in that space. Also, through the planning process that has been going on for decades, there's been a lot of great data that comes out of that. A lot of our river authorities have been around for a long time, and I'm not deeply knowledgeable about the data available in other states, but I do know that Texas sits pretty strongly in terms of what has already been collected. It's interesting because what you described at the beginning with your dissertation and the challenges accessing the data, that's exactly what we're trying to get at through the Texas Water Data Hub. The project that we'll go into a little bit is trying to address that type of challenge so that, when an individual wants to discover more and wants to learn more, that the information is both easy to find and to access. And so that's kind of the pressing question. I think it's true not just in Texas, but across the country. Like, when you want to ask those questions, how easy is it to get an answer?
Right. And that really old data is like gold. Was doing a project down the Texas coast, and I found out that an entity had been collecting and sampling water data in San Antonio Bay going back to the mid 1940s.
Nice.
Really before the drought of record. And I was, just obsessed with finding that data and finding their daily data. And, it turned out it was one of these experiences, kind of like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where, they take the Lost Ark and they put it in the giant warehouse and no one ever sees it again. Because I found the summary data in a library when I was told, by those who had paid to collect it that I couldn't have it, and other people, it didn't exist anymore. But the actual notebooks where they were taking the daily data, those had been in a warehouse in Maryland. And just the year before, they had decided to throw all that stuff out. And I was like, whoa. And, so, all right. Yeah, close but no cigar. So, the work that you're doing now, and that the board is doing, is not only to aggregate this data, but you're making it available to the public in a way that's not been made available to the public before. And so, tell us about that. What do you see as the value in that?
Well, I think the value in that is facilitating the kind of improving the kind of experience that you just described. And so what we're trying to do with the Texas Water Data Hub is to create an intuitive system to index, document, search, and access Texas water data. And so there are a couple of things that are important about that. One is that we're just talking about publicly available data. We're not trying to go out and get anybody's data that's private, that is not already made publicly available, and it's voluntary. So those are kind of the guardrails that the project operates within. But then we are looking to essentially make what I like to think of as a super sexy card catalog that allows you to go and find the information that you need. So it's making it easy to find and understand the data. So part of what we're doing, we're not holding anyone's data. That's another really important piece of this puzzle. So the data hub is not where any data lives. It's where the information about the data lives, as well as the opportunity to connect directly. And so what we would hope is that, folks collaborate with us, they put their data in the hub, and then it makes it easier for people like you, for consultants, for researchers, for government employees looking to do their work, to actually find the data and the information that they need to answer their questions, to complete their tasks, and that they would do that by being able to come to this card catalog, this data catalog, learn about the different data sets and understand, because we put information in about the quality assessment and quality control, QA/QC of the data set. So when your data set is put in there, you can describe it and you can say, this is really highly QA/QC'd. It's gone through 3 different people before it's published, or this is just directly collected and no one has had a chance to look at it. So then it allows you as the person who goes to the hub to make informed decisions about what data and information you want to use in answering your questions.
So before we get too far down the road and deep into data, I probably should, ask you to describe for us, because not everybody will be familiar with this. What are we really talking about in data? That could mean a lot of things. And so why don't you give us some examples of the kind of data that we're talking about here, and also, some examples of the kind of organizations that you're getting this data from and, aggregating it from.
So we're talking about all data that relates to water, and that's a really big umbrella. A few examples of water data would be things like beach access points or water quality data, and that could be about groundwater, that could be about surface water flows, also political boundary data like groundwater conservation district boundaries or regional water planning group boundaries. All of that, as long as there's a connection to the water space, then that's part of what we're looking for in the hub. In terms of the kinds of entities that we're partnering with, at this point, some of our partners in the hub are the Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts and the Texas+Water Foundation. So those are really nonprofit entities that work, one in the groundwater space specifically, one more broadly. So those are some partners. We also have other state entities like the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the Texas General Land Office, the Public Utilities Commission. We have river authorities like the San Antonio River Authority. We have some municipalities, a couple of municipalities, the city of Bernie and the city of Buda. And then we also have some examples of citizen science like the COCO-RAS, which is a weather reporting network. And then also the STREAM team that's out of Texas State that goes around and does work related to water quality across the state. So we have a wide variety of types of partner organizations, be they governmental or private, research institutions, and at different scales from local to statewide. And then also federal. We have some federal data in there as well.
So now tell us what the Water Data Hub is, Texas Water Data Hub, which is that's the name of the overall initiative.
Yeah, it's also the name of the website. So the Texas Water Data Hub is a platform. You can think of it as a website because you type in the URL and then you go to the website. But there are lots of different kinds of websites. And so this is a platform where you can access information in there are a couple of ways to access it, but it's divided out or categorized into three main buckets. One bucket is data. And so that is actual raw data sets that are going to have numerical values, different fields with different types of information. And so that's, your university researcher, your government employee, somebody who is looking to take raw data, analyze it, potentially transform it to be able to answer specific questions. So one thing you can do is get raw data from the hub. That data, part of what's really important about what we're doing in the hub is all of the data sets that are included also include metadata, which describes the data that you're going to get in a uniform way. So it's not like the metadata from the Public Utility Commission in the hub is going to look different from the metadata from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. It's the same for all of the data sets in the hub. So you can get raw data. Another one of the buckets is you can connect to the organizations that are contributing their data and information to the hub. So you can link to those and learn more about any of the partnering organizations. And then the third thing that I think is really valuable, because it will catch a wider group than the folks who are interested in the raw data, is applications. And so applications are platforms where the raw data has been converted into information, oftentimes in the forms of graphs or infographics, information on a map. So, an application like Google Maps is an application. The Texas Water Data for Texas is a really widely used platform in the water space. That's an application where you can go and you can see how the information has been processed, and you can see it, for example, a graphic that shows the water level in a reservoir and how it relates to previous levels, but you're not looking at just the numbers. So those are the three big ways that a user can interact with that platform: is raw data sets, learning about the entities or partnering organizations, and then actual applications that already provide insights into what the data are telling us.
I'm just thinking, why wasn't this around 25 years ago when I was doing my dissertation? Boy, this made my life so much easier. So
right.
It's probably not just the academic community, though, that is benefiting this. I imagine any water planner, river authority, groundwater district, any organization like that is got to figure out how to manage its water, or how to take on a water issue of one kind or another. They're probably going to be going to the Texas+Water Data Hub first to see what kind of information is out there before they try to solve their problem.
Well, yes, I hope so. And right now there's a lot of potential there because we have a number of partners, but we're really looking to grow the number of partner organizations, the number of data sets. That is heavy lifting because, as I mentioned, it's entirely voluntary. And right now we're actually kind of building the plane as we fly it. So that work, which is going to be where the real value add to the public, and the public being very broad, whether it's researchers, academicians, decision makers, the general public with a question about their water, that benefit really gets realized as we bring more data sets and more organizations into the hub, which is the heavy lift that we are working on now and will be working on for a long time.
So if you had to guess, how much of what is out there do you think you have now? I mean, I know it's hard to even know what's out there, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But do you have some sense of where you are in that process of getting the data and bringing it underneath the Texas+Water Data Hub compared to where you're probably going to be here in maybe 5 or 10 years?
We're definitely at the tip of the iceberg stage. Okay. And you know how the expression tip of the iceberg comes from the fact that I think it's 90% or slightly more of an iceberg is underwater. I don't think we've even hit that 10% yet. We're still, and it also depends a little bit on how you count. So for example, the USGS, we're looking at a few hundred stream gauges across Texas. We don't have their data in the hub yet. If we brought it in by stream gauge, that would be a couple of hundred data sets. If we brought it in aggregated at the river basin scale, then it would be far fewer data sets. So part of it is a question of how do you count? But just broadly thinking about the water data landscape, we're really just starting to crack open the door. So we've got a long ways to go there.
So once you have, I guess, critical mass or whatever you're going for here in terms of the amount of data you have available, what do you think is going to be the impact of having that data in one place and having it easily accessible?
Mm-hmm. I think it'll improve decision-making. It'll allow for more informed decision-making at multiple scales. So, our thinking about at the state scale, our leaders, our decision-makers, they rely on data from all of the entities across the state to inform their choices and to understand, do we need to prioritize drought-related work right now? Do we need to put more money into the state's water supply plan, or is flood where the larger deficit is? They're looking for that information. And those same kind of processes happen at all different scales. So I see it as really allowing for more informed decision-making. And I also think a really exciting part that we can't really see what will happen is that it will enable folks in the academic community, in the research world, which, includes our consultants and industry partners, all of those stakeholders as well. it will open up the world of possibilities in some ways that are not open now, because they'll be able to go to one place and see like, oh, there's actually data available on these brackish groundwater resources. And I've been looking into this other question. I can now connect, and I'm gonna pull these different data sets together and see if I can find some meaning there. So I think it will, by opening up the world of what's available in the water data space, allow those folks to draw some connections that maybe folks didn't realize were there before.
So tell us, what is fair data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. It's a somewhat new term. It's been around for close to a decade. I think it was 2014 that conversation around the concept of fair data started, and then the principles first came out in 2016. But FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And so I'll go through those one by one. Findable means that, it's pretty intuitive. Each of these words are that you can find it, that you can go to the internet and search and you can find it. So the hub is really focused on making it easier to actually connect to. So you can also think of it as the data is indexed. So the data sets that are in the hub are indexed, which makes them easier to find then through search functionality. Another thing is they're accessible. And so part of that means that you can actually, you're not just looking at the information on the screen, but you can pull down the data set, because sometimes you go to a website and you see all these great statistics, this information, but you can't actually access it. You can't download it. You can just look at it. So accessing it is being able to bring it down, and then also having the metadata always available with the data set. And again, the metadata is data about the data, or it's the information that describes the data set. Interoperable is where it gets really more challenging. That's having standardized vocabularies or data sets being related with a persistent identifier. You can think of persistent identifiers like our social security number. Your social security number doesn't change whether you're at the dentist or applying for a job or filling out your tax forms. That stays with you at every point in your life. And so if hydrologic features also have persistent identifiers, then that allows different data sets to be connected based on that point. And then lastly, reusable means that the resource is in a format that allows it that makes it easy to use for different purposes. And so you can manipulate the data. You can make your own choices, and then you can go back and get the raw data again, and you can make different choices with the data. So like a data in a table in a PDF is not easily reusable. You have to do some work to get it out of that PDF and get it into a format that you can easily start analyzing and working with. So the concept, and this is a broad data concept, it's not specific to water data, is that we should collectively, the larger, the grand we, be working toward making data fair, because that really, again, opens its potential and enables it for decision making and use by a wide audience.
So is the Texas Water Data Hub unique, or have you seen similar projects in other states or by other entities?
Good question. In some ways it's unique, and in some ways it's not. So it's not unique in that hubs have been around. We have different types of hubs in Texas. The Department of Information Resources has an open data portal. Texas Geographic Information System, that's part of the Water Development Board, they have a hub for geographic data. Regional hubs. Their hubs are not uncommon. Water data hubs, there are some of those that have been around as well, but a state level hub, of those there are few. In addition to Texas's effort, there are California, New Mexico, and Oregon. They all have Oregon's is under development. California and New Mexico, they already exist, but they all have legislation mandating the creation of those hubs. Texas is the only state that is of its own volition undertaking this work to create a hub, and our participation in our hub, again, is entirely voluntary. In those other 3 states that have hubs, they're compelled, they're at least at the state level, their organizations are compelled to work and to participate in that hub. So we are unique, and everything that we're developing an open source platform. So if other states or municipalities want to develop a hub using the same progression essentially, and they have, the developers who can do it, they would be able to access and use the code for what we're developing.
So what is, involved in putting a project like this together? I mean, I imagine you start to think about it and it quickly becomes really kind of overwhelming in some ways.
Yeah, it can. So this project is really interesting, and I've loved it all the way along. It actually started in 2018, which is interesting because we're 8 years out from 2018, but it started with a conversation abroad. We held a workshop with the broad water stakeholder community in Texas, first to ask, do we need something like this in Texas? Do we need a hub that, enables connection, or can people already get to the data? Can people find it? Is it already possible? And it was a resounding, yes, we need this. And then there's discussion about where should it be housed? What should it look like? What should it look like? So we started there with the question of, should we even be doing this? Because that would be a fool's errand if there was no need for it. After that, we got funding through the legislature. It was part of a large package that went along with some flood response work. So a big part of this was also focused on flood data, getting a flood viewer going. But coupled with that was starting to build this kind of foundation in the water space. And so we started with planning, which is really where you want to start, I think, with any large scale project. And we spent a year with UX, UI, or user experience, user interface design work. And so through philanthropy, and philanthropy has played a huge role throughout the development of the Texas+Water Data Hub. We got funding through philanthropy to hire a UX, UI designer to spend a year researching with the Texas+Water data community. What do you want a hub to be able to do? How would you interact with it? And it was a really creative and fascinating process. I had never participated in anything like that before. And through that work, we came out with a roadmap, essentially, for how the hub should be built, what the needs were, and what the mission and purpose of the hub should be. And then since that time, we've been building on the research in the actual development of the platform. So you build the front end, and the front end is what is the website that people see when they come and they interact with. But then you also have to do all the coding work on the back end to make every single component visible and to determine how many rows you're going to be able to see. So we've been working on the front end and the back end building at the same time. And there's a lot that has gone into that. So it really took a lot of planning. And then also it's just some patience and long-term commitment to really seeing the project through to fruition, because it is a long-term project that is small relative to the work of the agency. Our agency is really doing a lot, and this is a one piece of many, many pieces. So it's there's a lot of hard work that is going into it, and also understanding that this is a long road that we're traveling down.
So full disclosure, I think I was one of the facilitators in 2018.
Yeah, you were.
Those meetings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
take you back.
Yeah, it does. It does take me back. So can you give us some examples of the data that you find on the hub?
Sure. There are lots of different types. I mean, one type of data would be historical data. So for example, you can find some data about Hurricane Harvey or other high water marks. That's really relevant, especially as we're cruising into hurricane season. Also, there's citizen science data. So I mentioned COCO-RAWS, and I unfortunately cannot articulate right now what that acronym stands for, but it's you can get rainfall summaries. It's citizen science data collected on weather-related information. Also in the citizen science space, there's that Texas Stream team. They have water quality data. We also have real-time data through application programming interfaces or APIs with things like the Texas+Water, which is our hydrometeorological weather station network. So you can get some of that data. So there are a variety of types. There's groundwater data, some of our well locations, also through the TCQ, their surface water rights data is available. And you can download the full data set, which is a real benefit because the viewer through the TCQ, because of the type of interface, it limits the number of rows that you can download, but you can access actually the full data set through the hub. So that's a benefit that we're providing to our partners there.
So I have a rule on my podcast that we always have to know what acronyms are. So I'm going to tell you that COCO-RAS is Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. I think that's it, isn't it?
Excellent.
And
yes,
pretty sure that's it. I used to know this one, but like a lot of other things, I've forgotten it. But anyway,
I just pulled it up in the hub and confirmed that is accurate.
Okay, good. So I want to make sure we got that. So, can anybody contribute data to the hub? Thinking. You mentioned state and federal organizations and local water entities, but there are a lot of water researchers out there that have their own private data sets that are valuable. So I'm just curious, who can contribute data to the hub?
Good question. Right now, it has to be some sort of entity or organization that contributes to the hub. We don't have the capacity right now to support private individuals coming to the hub. So right now it's any entity that has data that relates to Texas water. So we're looking for stream flow, groundwater, reservoir levels, aquatic species, water use, water quality, any of those. And we're, as I was mentioning, looking for historical data, real-time data, variety of geographic scales, anything that goes across the water landscape. We would like, because the part of the challenge with what you described, Todd, with individuals having private collections of data is that they're not already publicly published in a publicly available data set that is machine readable and can be downloaded. In time, we would hope to find a way, because holding data or actually housing data, there's storage costs associated with that. And so that's a challenge is, if we find a way to partner with individuals, or somebody else that doesn't have their data published in that kind of way, where can we actually house that data, particularly if it's a point in time, like you did your dissertation, that work is completed, the associated data set is not being updated. We would need to find a way for that data set to be housed somewhere that we could then connect to it from the hub. So that's something that we're very aware of, that the potential in that space, because there are a lot of studies, there are a lot of historical studies that have, the type of data that you were describing, longitudinal data over decades that are not currently published and publicly available in a machine readable, downloadable format. So we know there's this treasure trove. And right now we don't have a path to get to it, but we know that that's something important to work on in the future.
And, with that, you've got to make sure that the website, address and all that, where it's located, is going to be maintained. And because I've seen that change over time. You go back, try to access data, and not there anymore. Then you got to chase it down, figure out where it's gone. So I imagine that's a real challenge.
Yeah. Well, and for us, our system runs a scan every night to make sure that that what we're linking to still works. And then if something comes back as the link is broken, and so then we address that and figure out, is it just gone? Did something happen? We might reach out to the partner organization. But for some of what we were just talking about, if there were an entity, sometimes universities maybe have the ability to store lots of these types of records, and then they have the persistent identifier, the persistent URL. We could go to them and pull from there. But you're right, it would not it would need to be something other than toddvotteler.org that we're pulling from. And then Todd Votteler decides he wants to change his name and now it's different. It would need to be housed in a larger structure. And there has to be an owner associated with the data set. It can't be just sort of free floating data that there's no one to have ownership of it, because that's essential to the metadata. Again, that is the heart of the catalog. And that catalog is really what facilitates making the data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable.
Gotcha. How about Rutger Votteler? That sounds pretty good. Yeah, that sounds like better than Todd. All right. Now I see where you're going there. So have you received a lot of feedback yet on the hub? I mean, has it been around and been, functioning long enough to get, valuable feedback?
We've gotten some. We haven't gotten a lot. The feedback that we've received has generally been positive. One of the things that I think of as a real victory is there's a professor at Texas State who sends his students to the hub to start their class research projects. It's a water resources class, and he tells them to go there to get going. To me, that's really great. We have also heard from some folks that we've talked with about partnering to get their data into the hub, and some of those entities need support. They would like to make their data more available and accessible. They would like to have an API, again, which is the application programming interface that essentially creates like a digital tunnel for other people to go in and connect and pull out that data, but they don't necessarily have the resources to do it. So we've heard a lot of folks that are interested in participating, but maybe don't have the resources. We have gotten positive feedback about the hub itself. The number of hits, because we monitor those each month, we're at about 1,600 hits a month on average, which we think is, pretty good. That number is continuing to go up, which we see is really positive. And we have on the website a lot of places where folks can offer feedback, and we would very much welcome it. There's on the right side, it's always there. There's a button where it says feedback and has a plus. You can click that button. There's a short survey. Folks can suggest data sets. So there are a lot of different mechanisms on the interface itself to allow folks to make suggestions, ask questions, and we really would love to see that also grow over time. And part of where we are now is that we're actually in the beta phase. So this isn't the fully realized hub. This is a version of the hub that is largely there. But one of the things that we want to be able to do is to have the partner entities be able to put the data into the hub themselves, to be able to make changes if changes are needed. Like, for example, how we were just talking about the change to a URL, and then that changes the access to the data set. We want those partner organizations to be able to go in and make those changes themselves. But that requires a lot of development on the back end. Again, the coding piece that is behind what we see on the website. And so we're building that. And it's really not until that piece that allows for our partner organizations to also be in the hub that we really will consider it fully realized and fully launched. And it will evolve over time. It's not like once we launch it, then it's done. It's an ongoing project. But we don't really even think of ourselves as fully having reached our first iteration yet. And I anticipate that once we get there, then we'll be able to really focus even more in depth on outreach and connecting with more entities. Gotcha.
I've got a project I'm working on that is a water project that I'm kind of using a Wikipedia model, maybe, so that people can update it who are, working on the same kind of issues and all. And so, no, I like that because it probably would get a lot more interest and participation if other entities feel like they have, a say in the management of it in some respects, or operation of it.
Right. Well, and a couple of things that are related to that I think are important to note are that in the metadata, we have a space for caveats and usage. So any organization, they can spell out, this is the way our data are meant to be used. And they are not meant to be used for this other purpose, for example. So that's really important. And then also when folks come to the hub and they ask a question, if it's a question about, for example, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality's water rights viewer, that question goes to the TCEQ staff to answer. We do not answer questions about other people's data because we're not the expert. So we would be CC'd, we would be able to see the questions that are going through, but everybody, you are always the owner. When you work in the hub, you are the owner of your data. We do not manipulate your data. You provide the information about your data and you answer the questions about your data. So we really value the expertise of all of our partners and are not trying to interject ourselves in any way. We're just trying to facilitate that connection.
That's probably good because I have a lot of questions about that water right. Which is great.
Have to.
Yeah, which is a great resource. No question about that. But I'm still trying to, figuring out how to use it effectively. So, what are the next steps for the Water Data Hub?
Good question. There are a few different things. So one is what I was just describing, continuing to build out that backend that will allow our partner organizations to create accounts and then be able to manage their data directly. So that's really important. Also, again, philanthropy that came in and is really helping us advance and accelerate the work of the hub. We got a grant recently from the Water Foundation to support a marketing and communications project so that we can get some help because we don't do marketing. We have a communications shop, but they're already very busy. But so we want to understand better, how should we be conducting our outreach? What types of events should we go to? What are the barriers to participation in the hub right now? So we want to explore that more so that we can work on improving how we brand, improving our outreach, and really work on growing participation in the hub. So implementing the work through that grant is an important next step. Growing the catalog, really just trying to get more partners and more entities to share data with us and with the larger state as a whole. That's really big. And then also, I feel like connecting and growing the water data community is really important as folks can more easily find and connect with the data. And there is a mechanism to ask a question. If you're conducting research and you don't understand why a particular field is what it is, then you can reach out and ask that question. And I think, as Texas grows, we all, you can't turn around without hearing somebody say that, over 100 or 1,000, whatever the number is, people are coming to Texas every day and nobody's bringing a drop of water with them. We know that is really true. And so we're going to have to be, over time, more efficient with our water and making better and more informed, as possible as the science and the data allow. That should be kind of at the front edge of decision making. And so growing and connecting this community that really forms the fabric that then underlies decision making, that's a big part of what we want to try to do.
I'm really excited about what the Texas Water Data Hub is going to accomplish in the future. And, I'm looking forward to using it more as time goes on. So, Sam, one final question. How can our listeners find out more about the Texas Water Data Hub?
They can go to the site, and that is found at TXWaterDataHub.org. So instead of spelling out Texas, it's just TX, but then it's TXWaterDataHub.org. And you can connect with us there again through the feedback form, the short survey. There are numerous ways. We tried to make it really easy for folks to connect with us via the platform. So we would love to hear from folks. We would love to get suggestions on data sets, ideas for how we can improve the experience. So that's the best way to reach us. And also just reaching out to the Texas Water Development Board, saying that you have a question about the Texas Water Data Hub, and folks will know how to direct you so that we can help answer that question.
It's really hard to make a discussion about data interesting, but you did it.
Oh, good. That is, it's the super sexy card catalog, right? Because usually those things don't go together in a sentence, but now they do.
Right. They do a card catalog and anything interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Very true.
Sam, thank you again for joining us today. I really enjoyed our discussion.
Yeah, me too. This is fun. And I really appreciate you having us on. I mean, as I said, we're trying to get the word out. We're trying to, help the larger water community and the Texas water community be informed about the work that we're doing. And this is a fabulous way to do that. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to share about the work.
Oh, well, you're most welcome. And we'll have to revisit this subject in a year or two. When you've got, more feedback, and we've seen how people are starting to use the water data hub. And so let's just kind of keep that in the back of our minds to circle back to this topic and see what has resulted in the next year or two.
That sounds great. Love to come back anytime.
Good deal. Well, this has been Talk+Water, and my guest today was Sam Hermitte, Assistant Deputy Executive Administrator for the Texas Water Development Board's Office of Water Science and Conservation. I want to thank you, the listener, for spending your valuable time on this podcast, and just remind you to let us know what you think about it, and let us, get your feedback on it. I'd love to know what you think about what we're doing here. And I want to give a big thank you finally to Anna Huff at the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University for getting each episode of Talk+Water ready to go. My name is Todd Votteler. Let's talk water again soon.